The air conditioning unit in the third-floor suite of the Excelsior Hotel in Rome sounded less like cooling machinery and more like a heavy, asthmatic animal struggling to breathe. It was October 1969. Khalid Fahmy, Egypt's most celebrated composer and actor, adjusted the cuff of his bespoke silk suit, though the movement was unnecessary. He wasn't nervous. He was utterly terrified. Fear wasn't a sudden shock. It was the metallic taste of a battery dying slowly on his tongue. Across the mahogany table, Elias sat perfectly still. He did not blink often. His gaze was the only truly cold thing in the room. Khalid reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and retrieved a silver, ornate cigarette case. He did not open it to offer a smoke. Instead, he placed it precisely in the middle of the table, then slid it forward with the tip of one finger until it stopped 2 inches from Elias's hand. "It is done," Khalid whispered, his voice hoarse, unrecognizable from the melodic tone that charmed millions in Cairo's grand theaters. Elias lifted the case. It was heavy. Under the delicate velvet lining lay a microdata, nearly invisible piece of film containing the complete, coded schematics of the Soviet SAM-3 missile deployment plan across the entire Suez Canal zone, along with operational schedules for the coming winter. This single, 2mm speck of information, retrieved from the heart of Egypt by its brightest artistic light, would not just change the balance of power in the Middle East. It would save the lives of hundreds of Israeli pilots who, until this moment, were flying blind into a newly constructed, impenetrable curtain of steel and radar. The price for that microdot, however, had already been paid, not in currency, but in the total, irrevocable destruction of Khalid Fahmy's soul. To understand the meticulous, cold-blooded chaos that brought an Egyptian national treasure to a secret room in Rome, trembling before a Mossad case officer, we must return to a silence far more dangerous than any gunfire. The silence after defeat. The year was 1968. The dust had settled from the Six-Day War, but the air remained toxic. Israel had achieved a decisive victory, but hubris was a luxury they could not afford. The humiliation felt by the Arab states, especially Egypt, was a catalyst for furious, silent reaction. Intelligence on the ground was scarce and often polluted by wishful thinking or Soviet disinformation. General Staff demanded eyes and ears inside the inner circle of Gamal Abdel Nasser's government, specifically targeting the Soviet advisors swarming the Canal Zone, rebuilding the air defense network faster than anticipated. They needed information on the intent, not just the capability. The search criteria were brutal and specific: high access, low suspicion, non-military profile, and a profound, exploitable weakness. The name that surfaced repeatedly, filtered through weeks of meticulous vetting by Elias's unit in Tel Aviv, was Khalid Fahmy. Khalid wasn't just a star, he was an institution. Composer, occasional director, and host of state cultural events. He frequented the exclusive political clubs and was considered a friend of the elite, often performing for Nasser's own family. No one would ever suspect him of treason. He was Egypt's song. Yet, behind the spotlight, Khalid's life was collapsing. His success had fueled a disastrous gambling addiction centered on high international poker games. He invariably lost. The debt was staggering, held not by banks, but by certain highly unpleasant people connected to the shadowy fringes of the Lebanese financial underworld. Men who broke legs long before they filed lawsuits. Elias studied the files, not the music reviews, but the financial ledgers. He saw the subtle panic lines around the man's eyes in candid photographs, the forced smile in the face of ruin. This wasn't ideology they were exploiting, it was pure, desperate survival. The plan was not to directly approach Khalid as Mossad that would risk immediate exposure or a counter-recruitment attempt. The plan was to solve his problems in a manner so seductive, so seemingly serendipitous, that Khalid would walk willingly into a cage constructed of gold and debt. The mechanism was named the Canary Cage. Elias, operating under the highly polished cover of Jean-Pierre Dubois, a wealthy Swiss investment banker specializing in international arts funding, began the approach through Beirut. He arranged for one of his proxies, a highly connected woman named Lila, who truly believed she was setting up a legitimate art foundation to attend a private benefit where Khalid was scheduled to perform. Lila's task was simple: establish proximity, express deep admiration, and most importantly, listen. Within 3 weeks, Elias had confirmation. Khalid was frantic. He needed $150,000 within the next month, or the Lebanese creditors would make good on their promise. Elias moved. He appeared at the benefits after party in Beirut, not aggressively, but as a quiet, observant figure. When Khalid, tired and visibly distracted, sat alone with a glass of scotch, Elias approached, offering a seemingly irrelevant observation about the composition Khalid had just conducted. The conversation drifted smoothly, guided by Elias's calculated empathy to the pressures of maintaining an artistic lifestyle. Khalid, exhausted in seeing a phantom solution, eventually confessed his financial woes to the Swiss banker. "It's a shame, Monsieur Fami," Elias murmured, clinking the ice in his glass. "Such talent, to be wasted on these petty debts." Elias offered the full $150,000, immediately, no questions asked, as a personal investment in Khalid's snack film, project that existed only in Elias's imagination. The terms were simple: a handshake, a contract so vague it was worthless, and the promise of future collaborations. Khalid signed the papers in a haze of relief. Elias smiled, a genuine but terrifyingly cold expression. The canary was fed. The first phase of the recruitment was psychological conditioning, a slow tightening of the screws. Over the next 2 months, Jean-Pierre maintained contact, sending expensive gifts and asking for small, harmless favors. Introductions to powerful political figures in Cairo for potential investments, or harmless gossip about the mood in the presidential palace. Things Khalid could easily provide, confirming his continued loyalty to the money that saved his life. The pressure increased subtly. Elias began asking specific, seemingly innocuous questions about the movements of Soviet advisors, where they dined, what hotels they frequented, which generals they spent time with. He framed it as economic intelligence, tracking potential competition in regional development deals. One evening, during a supposed planning meeting for the non-existent film project in Athens, Elias presented Khalid with a thick file. "My dear Khalid, this is the final piece of business, just a small matter of due diligence." The file was damning. It contained comprehensive photographic evidence, meticulously logged, of Khalid's original, illegal debts, including the names of the Lebanese thugs, along with a full transcript of his initial, panicked confession to Elias in Beirut. It wasn't a threat, it was a physical demonstration of Elias's omnipotence. "If you fail to cooperate," Elias said, his voice dropping to a flat monotone, "this file, detailing your illegal activities, your massive debts, and your association with foreign funds, will arrive at the desk of General Fawzi. By tomorrow morning, your career will be over. Your family will be disgraced." The air left the room. Khalid wasn't just compromised, it was honed. The subtle exchange was complete. Elias had transformed the artist into a high-grade intelligence asset. The weight of the treason was immediate and debilitating. Khalid returned to Cairo a ghost. He smiled for the cameras, but the joy was gone, replaced by a constant, low-level thrum of fear that settled deep in his chest. One afternoon, standing on the balcony of his lavish apartment overlooking the Nile, the city sounded deafeningly loud. The horns, the calls to prayer, the distant sounds of life all normal. But for Khalid, the world had gone silent. He was surrounded by millions who adored him, yet utterly alone. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up toward the hot Egyptian sun, momentarily clouding the view of the river. It was a rare moment of stillness, a forced pause in the frantic race of his new life. He looked at a portrait of his daughter, smiling innocently. The contrast between her pristine world and his moral cesspool was agonizing. The silence broke when the telegram arrived. Simple instructions for an upcoming high society event. The target was now operational. The mission was critical. Israeli reconnaissance believed the Soviets had deployed the newest generation of surface-to-air missiles, the SM-3, in hidden, hardened bunkers west of the canal. They needed precise targeting data. Khalid was instructed to attend a private dinner hosted by Minister of War, General Ahmed. It was a small gathering, only key military, their wives, and, inexplicably, Khalid, the cultural mascot. Elias's instructions were complex. The information is hidden in plain sight. It will be a newly commissioned military map, detailing the rotation schedules. You must photograph it, even if imperfectly. The dinner was held in the General Isse private bija, a fortress of stucco and silence. The wine flowed. The conversation was heavy with post-war bravado, and Khalid played his role flawlessly, the charming, slightly dramatic artist, distracting the wives and flattering the generals. He scanned the room. The general's personal aide, Major Hish, a young man known for his meticulous order, had placed the heavily rolled, official-looking map tube next to his chair. Too obvious. The target, was inside. Khalid waited for the crucial moment when the conversation turned heatedly toward the merits of Soviet versus French weaponry, creating a natural distraction. He excused himself to the restroom, returning with a borrowed fountain pen modified by Mossad to contain a tiny, high-resolution camera. His heart was pounding against his ribs, a frantic snare drum that surely everyone in the room could hear. Khalid approached Major Hisham's chair, feigning a clumsy stumble. He intended to knock the map tube loose, causing a brief diversion allowing him to access the open briefcase nearby. But his execution was terrible. The stumble was too aggressive. Instead of merely nudging the tube, Khalid collided hard with the back of Hisham's chair, sending a glass of red wine soaring across the table, splattering directly onto the crisp white uniform of the general's top strategist, General Mahmoud. The sudden silence was deafening. Every eye turned to Khalid. The mission had failed, spectacularly and messily. General Mahmoud rose slowly, wine dripping from his appeal. His eyes were cold, not with anger, but with dangerous, immediate suspicion. Fahmy? General Mahmoud stated, his voice tight. You seem unwell. Khalid froze. He could feel the blood drained from his face. The general wasn't simply questioning his drunkenness. He was questioning his presence. The general was moving toward him. Exposure was seconds away. In a split-second act of sheer, desperate improvisation fueled by the terror of a lifetime in prison, Khalid leaned into his performance. He didn't apologize. He didn't retreat. Ebrok. Ebrok. He clutched his forehead dramatically, letting out a loud, theatrical moan. He swayed violently, his knees buckling, forcing General Mahmoud to instinctively reach out to catch him. The heat. The noise. My head ... double quotes, Khalid guessed, using every ounce of his acting prowess to channel genuine distress into a convincing display of nervous collapse. I apologize, General. My doctor warned me. Vertigo, the pressure the act was overdone. Embarrassing. Humiliating. But it worked. The suspicion in General Mahmoud's eyes was instantly replaced by contempt and pity. Get that artist out of here, the general snapped, pushing Khalid away, roughly. He is drunk and weak. Hisham, call his driver. Now, as Major Hisham scrambled for his phone, distracted by the sudden command, the diversion Khalid needed was created. The original map tube was useless, but as he was being steered toward the door, Khalid saw it. Hisham's briefcase was still open, and sitting on a side table was a newly drafted, unrolled schematic chart, temporarily placed there during the wine crisis. It was a partial overview of the deployment. As Hisham guided him past the table, Khalid pretended to nearly faint again, throwing his arm out wildly for balance. His hand landed momentarily on the chart, the modified pen in his grasp. One rapid, almost involuntary press of the button. Click. It was enough. He was escorted out the front door, drenched in cold sweat, the taste of failure and the terror of discovery overwhelming him. But buried deep in the pen was the proof, a high-resolution image of the some 3 positions. The extraction from Cairo became a nightmare defined by pure psychological terror. Khalid had the intelligence, but he still had to leave the country. Elias had booked him on a commercial flight to Paris the next morning, ostensibly for a cultural meeting with French producers. But the airport was never safe. Khalid arrived at Cairo International hours early, the modified pen surgically hidden in the hollowed heel of his shoe. The critical data, however, was no longer in the pen. Elias's local asset had met Khalid briefly in a staged chance meeting, in a coffee shop, restroom, and retrieved the microcamera. The resulting microdot, the size of a grain of salt, was now secured inside a dental filling specially prepared for the transfer. The fear was sensory. Every Egyptian security guard who looked his way seemed to know his secret. The smell of jet fuel and cheap airport coffee nauseated him. He felt the cold, hard grain pressing against the inside of his cheek, fearing that a cough or a sneeze would dislodge it, sending the intelligence and his life spiraling down a drain. He moved through immigration like a puppet on cut strings, his charm abandoned, replaced by a rigid, haunted expression. The immigration officer looked up, recognized him immediately, and smiled broadly. Mr. Fahmy, we await your new concert series. Khalid managed a weak nod. The officer stamped his passport, seemingly oblivious. Relief washed over Khalid. He had done Italiano. He was through. He moved into the bustling, anonymous, international departure lounge. He found his seat on the plane, buckled in, and watched Cairo shrink beneath the wing. As the tires left the tarmac, a profound wave of exhaustion hit him. He was safe. He was free. The feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. When the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris, the plan was simple. Khalid would clear customs, head to the baggage claim, and be met by a discreet Mossad escort team pretending to be film executives. The microdot would be extracted in a safe house. He joined the long queue for French customs, already mentally rehearsing the quiet life he hoped the Mossad would afford him. Then, the sudden chill. About 10 meters ahead of him in the line, standing ramrod straight and dressed in an immaculate, if slightly provincial, dark suit, was a man Khalid recognized instantly. Colonel Rashid. Rashid wasn't Mossad. He wasn't French. Colonel Rashid was the senior liaison officer for Egyptian military intelligence, stationed at the Egyptian embassy in Paris. Known for his paranoia and his uncompromising loyalty to the regime. Rashid wasn't looking at Khalid. He was standing near the customs desk, clearly observing the arriving passengers with the keen, predatory focus of a falcon. He wasn't waiting for a specific person. He was watching everyone. Panic clawed at Khalid's throat. Why was Rashid here? Had he been followed from Cairo? Was this a trap set by Egyptian counterintelligence who knew he was running, but needed to catch him in a foreign territory to make the capture stick? Khalid ducked his head, turning his face away, pretending to rummage through his carry-on bag. He was trapped. If he stopped moving, Rashid might recognize his sudden hesitation. If he advanced toward the customs desk, Rashid would undoubtedly see him. Elias had anticipated that a known asset might be placed under passive surveillance, but Rashid's presence was too high level for routine monitoring. It meant the Egyptians suspected something was wrong with Khalid's rapid, unscheduled departure. Elias, positioned discreetly near the terminal entrance under his Jean-Pierre Dubois cover, saw Rashid and immediately understood the danger. Rashid would likely not attempt an arrest in Paris, but he would certainly intercept Khalid and demand to know his itinerary, creating a diplomatic incident that would burn the entire operation and potentially compromise the microdot before extraction. Elias had to act, and he had less than 90 seconds before Khalid reached the desk. He signaled his secondary team. They knew the emergency protocol. Maximum chaos, immediate separation. One of the female Mossad agents, posing as a frantic, began screaming hysterically near the ticket counters, pointing to a suitcase. At the same time, the second agent, a large man with medical training, sprinted toward the customs queue and, seemingly by accident, violently shoved Khalid sideways. "I need a doctor, now," the agent roared in flawless French, clutching his chest dramatically, collapsing onto Khalid and forcing him to the floor in a heap of luggage and civilian bodies. The distraction was total. Colonel Rashid, annoyed and focused on the customs agent, looked away for a split second. The medical agent, still pretending to seize, whispered urgently to Khalid, pinning him under his body. "Get up, now. North exit. Follow the Red Cross sign." Khalid, that's it, scrambled free. He abandoned his luggage and ran, blending into the surging crowd drawn by the fake medical emergency. He saw Rashid turning back, scanning the crowd, but the chaos was too dense. Khalid fled through a maintenance corridor, pointed out by the agent, feeling the hard plastic of the dental filling still lodged under his tongue. He didn't stop running until he reached the sterile safety of a waiting car, where Elias sat calmly in the back seat. The car sped away from the airport, leaving the glamorous life of Khalid Fahmy and the terror of Colonel Rashid behind them. The debriefing occurred 3 days later in a secured, unassuming flat outside Zurich. It was clinical, quiet, and exhausting. Khalid sat opposite Elias, who was now dressed in a simple, gray utility uniform that disguised a jumpia fully shed. Elias did not offer praise or congratulations. He was merely assessing the yield. A specialist dentist, flown in from Tel Aviv, carefully removed the minute dental filling. The microdot was extracted and rushed to analysis. Elias leaned back, pouring 2 small cups of bitter, black coffee. "It's good," Elias confirmed quietly, after receiving the coded message verifying the intelligence. "The schematics match our projections. The SAM batteries are exactly where the map indicated, and the rotation schedules confirm operational readiness by early spring. We now have the coordinates to negate their advantage." Khalid nodded slowly. There was no joy in the confirmation, only profound emptiness. He had traded his country, his art, and his identity for a tiny, life-saving piece of film. "What now?" Khalid asked, his voice low, almost resigned. Elias looked at him, his expression neither warm nor cold, just professional. "The Mossad honors its commitment. You're a highly valuable, highly compromised asset. Cairo can never be an option. The legend of Khalid Fahmy, the artist, died at Charles de Gaulle. Khalid was given a new identity, a wealthy merchant who would spend his remaining years bouncing between South America and neutral Europe, perpetually looking over his shoulder. He was rich, safe, and utterly alone. The Sum 3 coordinates provided by Khalid Fahmy allowed Israeli Air Force planners to develop specific countermeasures, training their pilots to bypass or suppress the new missile sites. This crucial head start mitigated the Egyptian advantage in the coming years. When the Yom Kippur War arrived in 1973, while Israel suffered heavy losses, the intelligence gathered years earlier by the man who spilled wine on a general was vital in preventing an early total catastrophe in the skies over the Suez. Khalid Fahmy, the name, vanished from the public eye. Rumors persisted in Cairo's artistic circles. A nervous breakdown, a tragic overdose, a quiet relocation to Paris. Years later, Elias, now a senior analyst, reviewed the file on the canary cage. He didn't dwell on the mission's success, which was undeniable. He thought, instead of the extraordinary cost of the required betrayal, the greatest victories in intelligence rarely involved explosive action or heroic rescues. They were achieved in the quiet rooms of compromise, built upon the ruins of a single human life, carefully pushed past the point of no return. Khalid Fahmy secured the freedom of a nation, but lost his own forever. The Mossad had turned Egypt's biggest star into their secret weapon, ensuring that his final, perfect performance was one the world never saw.